Begin the Quran Daf Mesechtes Bava Metzia Daf Lamed Tes. Begin 3 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues from the brisa that we quoted on the previous Daf, the end of the brisa, which was regarding this halacha of when you have somebody that his property is not being taken care of, which we had in many different cases of the guy's what's called a shavui or a captive, or netushim, retushim. He was forcibly taken away. He was willingly he left, and we said that it has different halachas. We had machlekes in certain cases that definitively the relative could take it over. Sometimes he definitively cannot take it over. And now the brisa, the Gemara quotes the end of the brisa that says, but all of them has a certain halacha, and that's what the Gemara is going to explain. What is that actually going on? That's what's mamish like these dafim that we're learning. Mamish, usually learn these. It's very hypothetical, theoretical, and these mamish, it gives that sitta, the sugyas of shvuyim of, we say the achenim bnei Yisrael. It's mamish afela iridish, mamish bizoichet, mamish Yeshua. You learn. They say when you learn the sugya, it gives you the siyata d'shmaya of those sugyas that we should see that they're speedily redeemed in our days. Some of the things we're discussing in today's daf are a meridin karv l'nichsei shaveh, as we're discussing. Do you bring down a relative when you have someone who's taken as a captive? So now he's stuck in captivity. Do you have a relative go and take over his property? 3 halachas that Rav Huna said, interesting regarding this sugya. One is he said, "Ein meridin katan l'nichsei shaveh." So if let's say nebuch lo yalein, we have these situations where people are taken captive and the relative is a minor. They left over. There's a 10-year-old boy who is the one relative, and the family is there in Gaza. You don't have a child. You don't have a minor take over the estate of the captive. And v'loy karvel l'nichsei katan, which you have this also. Let's say the one remaining of the family is a little boy in Gaza. The parents were shot and killed, and the only one who is there from that village, from that property, is a child. You don't have a relative of him, some uncle of his lives in Beersheba. You don't have him take over the child's property, who's captive. And so let's say the captive is again a child, and he's the sole heir of this property, but he's in captivity. You don't have his relative's relative, as we're going to explain, take over that property, as we'll see the reason for that also. Some important terms and consequences in today's daf are cheskes gemoshanim, which we'll see in Bava Metzia in great length next Masechta. But that's the idea that if you're in possession of a property for 3 years, we presume that it's yours because no one protested. I think Gemara brings an interesting story, which again, for all we know, do you have such a story that happened now of a hisavsa? There was an elderly woman that had 3 daughters, and her with one of her daughters were taken captive, and there was 2 remaining daughters. What do we do with her property because of this of the variables we spoke about, Rav Huna's halacha, where regarding there was a grandchild, and as we'll see, regarding what do you do in that type of situation because of the questions that come up with captivity. So we begin the current Daf Lamed Tes, 3 lines down at the top of the Amud. So Tana, the end of that brisa that we quoted, that we finished in the end, the previous Daf says, the Kulam, now all of them, which the Gemara is going to explain shortly, which cases are going on. When you're saying all of them, like this, you're trying to, what are you coming to include when you say Kulam? But all of them, shamalem ka'agas, that we evaluate them like a sharecropper, meaning if the owner ultimately does come, so then the guy who is working the field, he'll take the increase, this that he did the increase of the property and the payers, the way sharecroppers take at that place. That's what the brisa ends off saying. Says the Gemara, hi, which case is going on? There's a few cases you mentioned in the brisa. Ilim ashabuyin, if it's going on a captive. So what do you mean? Hashta, you told me in the brisa Zars of Nisker Hava. You told me that the guy, he's actually, if he heard reports that the owner's about to return, you told me that that the relative, quickly cut the fruits. So that's that. You said he gets to keep all the fruits. Well, my de ashpach mebaya. So you have to tell me that regarding whatever he benefited, of course he's going to get. You said even the fruits that are still there that he quickly cuts off, of course. So it can't be the case of captive that he gets like a sharecropper. Obviously, he gets like a sharecropper on the shavach, because even the produce he's taking it all himself. Sell aratushim. No, it must be going on the other case as we spoke about. There's the case of netushim. There's the case of ritushim. Must be going in the case of when the guy left on his own. So there can't be that case either. But you told me that case that you have no right to go down because the guy left willingly. We don't know where he is. Maybe he took a world tour and he just didn't tell anyone. So then you can't get involved. So then you actually would not get it like an aris. So the Gemara, Ella must be the other case. So it can't be the shavui, the captive. It can't be the retushim. It must be on the tushim. So the Gemara says that also doesn't make sense. Laman, according to whom? Elam the Rabbanan, if it's like Rabbanan, Harmi, you said Metzinas Miyadi. You said Rabbanan hold the tushim as they hold by in the way like by the captive, that you don't let a relative come down, and you actually take it away from him. So obviously he's not getting like an aris, like a sharecropper. If you worked it, it's your fault. But he said the tushim like shvuyin. And by shvuyin you told me it's a double pashid. Of course he'll get like an aris because even he's zarz v'nisker, he could even take the produce. So what case is this talking about that you're saying, oh, and all of them will evaluate them like an aris? So the Gemara says no. Kishvuyin v'loy shvuyin. Although we said that Reb Shimon Gamliel holds, yes, we're going to Reb Shimon Gamliel, holds in the tushim are like shvuyin. Again, the tushim are where the guy was forcibly taken away from his produce, although he's not captive, but it's like the same idea as a captive. That's where we're going to say that we're going to evaluate like an aris. But we said if it's like a captive, we already obviously know that because even the captive, you could even quickly snatch the payers before the guy's coming back. They're in the Red Cross van, and you're quickly going and running and snatching it off. Of course, you're going to get like an aris. Says no, you're like a captive, but not totally like a captive. What does that mean? So Gemara explains. Kishvuyin, the netushim is like a captive. The emetzinas miyada, that we don't take it away from him. But v'loishvin, it's not like a captive. The ilu hasim, whereas over there by the captive is zarz b'nisker. We said that yes. If he's diligent, he's going to gain. If he quickly cuts it off before the owner comes back into the property, that's because since they heard that he died, when this guy got involved, his intention was he thought he's getting it all. Now, but it turns out his relative is still alive, so he's quickly got to get it out and clear out home and then get out quickly. But Vilu Hacha over here, where they didn't hear that he died, so he didn't come there with the intention of getting. And it'll take like a sharecropper every single year. And you're right, the rest of the pays will have to be left. So that's what I mean like ka'achas. That's what we're saying. We evaluate him like a sharecropper. He doesn't get to just cut off everything. So it depends if they knew that that the guy had been, if they heard that he died or not. So in the case when they heard that he assumed he's getting everything, so that's where he's zarz v'nisker. But over here that we're saying shalom ka'aris. So that's what we're saying that, no, the guy thought the guy is probably alive. And I'll probably get like a sharecropper. So there was a sharecropper, and if the guy's still alive, he has to leave it for that guy. Now says the Gemara, but why is this any different that when we learn the Mishnah Masechtas Ksubas? A very different halacha. What does the Mishnah say? Mishnah says, if someone spent money on his wife's assets, which we know nichse malug is the wife, it's hers, she gets to hold on to it. But the husband eats the payers. But he's investing. He's like, honey, I see this we could really invest in this. He spends a lot of money in it. So says the Mishnah, let's say he spent a lot of money on his wife's nechasim. Ends up, before he died or before he divorced her, he only got to consume a little bit. I mean, he's obviously investing. He can have selfish motives too, because invest in the item, the produce, the dividends is going to be much greater. But he didn't get a chance, and they got in the whole fight. He spent $5,000 on her thing. He only ate up $300 worth of it. Well, let's say the other round. Let's say Kimmy only invested a little bit. He invested $300. He ate $5,000 worth of it. So the Mishnah says it doesn't make a difference. Whatever you invest, whatever you ate. But one thing is, we don't say that the husband is like a sharecropper. Isn't this the same idea? Isn't this that this relative, the one who's captive, this relative comes down and he invests? So why are you saying that from his investment he gets like a sharecropper? Why is there any different than the husband and his wife's property? She owns it. You can get benefit from it. Whatever is done is done. Whatever you got, you got. Why are we saying that? Oh, now the guy comes back, he's got to pay you like a sharecropper. 50%, 33%, a quarter. Why? Why is there any different than that halacha? Says, no, halay dami, it's not true. The halacha of the estate of a captive is not similar, but el haditnan. Although our Gemara says that nan, the Gemara on the side, at least in my Gemara says it's actually Rabbi Yaakov Omer of Chizda. That's how it's brought Ksubas not payment out. It's actually on the Meira. That what? Following halacha. That it's actually similar to a wife that's a minor. A guy got married to an 8-year-old girl. So the halacha is very different. The Mishnah says, if someone spends money on the estate of his wife who's a minor, which is she was an orphan, and her mother and her brother got her married. So that kedushin is not biblical; it's only rabbinic. So therefore, the halacha is interesting. The woman, the girl, can walk out whenever she wants to against his will. She could just do what's called me, and she could refuse it. So there, when that husband invests, says the Mishnah, it's kamitzi al nifsi achadami. It's like actually investing in the property of someone else, which is that if he invested and he didn't consume all the amount that he invested, we evaluate you like an oris on someone else's property if you invested like a sharecropper. Alma, we see why. Why is a minor wife any different than an adult wife? Because since the husband is not confident that he'll be able to hold on to our property, he's worried. This girl can walk out whenever she wants to. So Tekini Le Rabbanan, the Rabbanan instituted that he should take like a sharecropper, that he shouldn't ruin it because he might just constantly abuse her property. He says, "Honey, this is my property. I get the pears." He's not gonna properly hoe it and irrigate it and all the different things. He's gonna rape the land, so that he shouldn't ruin it because she can walk out whenever she wants to. He said, "No, don't worry. You're gonna get like a sharecropper." He said, "Oh, okay, fine. So it's worth it for him to invest because he's getting dividends. He's getting anyways the investment." Here also the rabbis instituted that this relative of the captive should be like a sharecropper, that he shouldn't ruin it. So the same svara that we see over there applies, in contrast to a regular wife, where she cannot just walk out. So although it technically could happen, but we're not concerned, there we didn't institute, but like a minor wife, that's the same halacha we're saying over here. Now, as we quoted in the beginning of the daf, the brisa there had ended off by saying, which we explained, as Taisus on the top of the Amud, it says, according to Rabbi Shloimy of Netushim, which was when the guy was forcibly taken away from his property, the brisa said, V'kulan shomlim ka'aras. And all of them, we evaluated him like a sharecropper. It says about the word V'kulan is not going on more than one case. So V'kulan is an inclusionary terminology. Lasu Yomai, what other case is this coming to include that's going to have this halacha that we evaluate like a sharecropper? Says the Gemara, Lasu Yaha, it's coming to include the following teaching of Rav Nachman. If let's say a guy ran away because of murder, that is similar to the case of Netushim, where the guy had to run away. So although it's not the same thing, he wasn't forcibly taken away. When we're saying V'kulan, we're coming to include that case. As the Gemara brings up, Rav Nachman B'Shmuel says, Shavish and Nishba. So a guy was taken captive, so that we know Maridin Korban Nechasav. You bring down this close of kin down to his estate. Now, what happens if Yatzla Das? Let's say he deliberately left. So then Maridin Korban Nechasav, then you don't bring down any relative to his estate because since he was totally sane and he didn't say anything before he left, that anyone should take over his property, obviously he doesn't want. Now, the main thing we want is the next teaching. Rav Nachman the Dideyam, that was what Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel. Rav Nachman himself said, a guy who's a fugitive is like a captive, where his thoughts were not settled because he was overwhelmed. And since he's a fugitive, that will have the same halacha. So he must say, wait, why is he a fugitive? What's he running away from? If it's because of taxes, that he doesn't have what to pay back to the government, his taxes, and he's running away before the time comes for the collections, well, hainu ladas. There's no bahala. There's no chaos over there. So he has to run out of town, but why didn't he tell people? Obviously, he doesn't want anyone to take it over, which, as Taisus brings in Dirmas Chanadas, we presume he doesn't disagree on Shmuel. And so if that's the case, so Ella says the Gemara, rather, Beirech Machmas Mardim. Must be that he's a fugitive because he killed someone. And the Persians, they execute if you kill someone, as the Gemara says about Bava Metzia Daf Zayin Mid Aleph. That's what Nachman saying. Therefore, if he's a fugitive because of murder, that's the similar theme as Netushim. And that's why we're including from the word of the brisa of a kulan. Now, a related idea, Amr B'Huda Mishmul, he says, Shavish and Nishba. The guy was taken captive. V'nich kama likter. And as he was taken captive, which Lo Yaleinu, we had this, which on October 7th, the people were not prepared. V'nich kama likter. And he left. Maybe, who knows, Sukkot's time was around the time of the maybe something was ready to be harvested. He left a standing grain to be harvested. Or another livtzer, he left grapes to be harvested. Or tomorrow likter, the same terminology, just different words, of dates to be harvested. Or Zaysim Limsik, where you had the olives to be harvested. So what's the halacha? What do you do? So Bezdin Yard L'chasav. So first the courts get involved, and the rabbis come and they go down to his estate. They appoint a caretaker, and they do all this harvesting on all the fruits that were left over there, to first gather whatever is prepared and to make sure it's safeguarded for the owner. And then you call up his cousin Shmulik from the south, and you say, "Come, we need you to go ahead and work on it, and you'll get paid like a sharecropper." So the Gemara says, "Why are you doing it like that? Why don't you keep the original contract? You had the court, the bezin, the rabbis got a caretaker to do the harvesting. Why don't you get a caretaker to don't take anything at all? Why are you getting his relative involved who's going to start taking like a sharecropper?" Says the Gemara, "Apetrapa lediknani, a caretaker for elderly people, loy mekminan, that we don't appoint." So it's very interesting how marketing of chesed works. Rashi explains the court, the bezdin, the rabbis, they're not going to put an effort to get a caretaker for adults who already have their beards full, because you're not going to find anyone. For orphans, people are going to hear about it. People are willing to be an apotropos for a mitzvah purpose, but for older people are not interested in doing. It's not the type of attractive type of a chesed. People can say, "Oh, I'll offer." No. But if it's orphans, that's where we have apotropos, and always people are willing to step up and do. But you're not going to find the caretaker. The rabbis have to be very practical and say, let's get his relative and let his relative get like a sharecropper. Now, the Gemara introduces on this theme of captivity 3 halachas from Avuna. Amar Avuna, Imer didn't cotton l'nichsei shavei. Halacha number 1 is that if the heir was a minor, so Bezdin does not appoint him for the care for the field of the shavei, and v'loy karv l'nichsei cotton. Halacha number 2 is that if the shavei was a minor, Bezdin does not appoint his heir, such as his brother, let's say, to care for the field. And halacha number 3 is like karev machmas karev l'nichsei cotton. Even though only a relative to the cotton's relative, even that we wouldn't appoint him to be the one to take care of the property. So the Gemara explains all these 3 halachas. Halacha number 1: Emerin cotton l'nichsei shavei. We said that if the heir of the captive was a minor, Bezdin does not appoint him to care for the field of the shavei, even though he's fit to inherit. So that's because dima mafsidlu, because he might ruin the field, because he's a little child. He doesn't know how to take care of properties. So it's better to get a foreign person to take care of the properties for a very technical reason. That's halacha number 1. Halacha number 2, we said, the other way. Look, no, there's actually halacha number 3. Halacha number 3 is that you don't get even a relative of the cotton's relative. I mean, if the shavei was a child, you don't get his relative's relative to take it over. So the Gemara qualifies that it means ba'achi ima. So as Rashi explains the case in the Masech B'lei Karev, for example, let's say you have a child who was taken captive, is in Gaza, and he has a paternal brother, which means they share the same father. Now that paternal brother has a maternal brother, which means to say they share the same mother, but obviously not the same father, because that would be his brother also. So these 2 brothers, that again, they have the same father, that brother has a maternal brother, which is unrelated to the child. You don't take that maternal brother down to the estate of the minor because of his relationship to his brother, which is the child's paternal brother, because he's going to end up taking possession of it for the purposes of his brother, and he's going to say, "Oh, these properties, well, my maternal brothers, which he inherited from his father," because again, that child is also from the same father, and they're going to come to divide this estate, so you can't even bring down the paternal brother's maternal brother. And going back to the second halacha, v'loy karev, and you don't bring down a relative that's fit to inherit l'nichsei katan, to the estate of a child that's a captive, to work on it and to eat it, because kivin d'lei machoi, since the child is only a child, he doesn't know to protest. Asi, this relative is going to come l'achzuki bey, to take possession, and he's going to say, "Oh, that it came to his portion of the Yerusha." So it's better to get a foreign person who can't make any claim of Yerusha than to have this relative by the minor who doesn't know to protest and say, oh, I didn't know. Now, Amar Rava says, Shema min Amar Rav Huna says, one thing we see from these teachings of Rav Huna, from the halacha that you don't bring down the relative to the state of a minor, because he might take possession of it because of Yerusha, but someone else who doesn't have a claim of Yerusha, you do bring him down, and that would not concern that maybe he's going to claim that the father of this child sold it to me, and I consumed it for the years of a chazak. I mean, basically the Gemara is asking, what does it help? This other guy, this foreign guy, will say that it was sold to him. No, you can infer from Rav Huna that you cannot make a chazaka, you cannot take a possession in the estate of a child if you didn't consume in front of the father 3 years. So the 3 years that you eat in front of the child is not a chazaka, as the Gemara contains some days, but for a higdal. And even if the child became an adult, he had bar mitzvah from when you had been in the field, and you ate 3 years after his bar mitzvah, it's not a chazaka. Because since your initial descent into the field was when he was a minor, so he didn't know that when he becomes an adult that it was his father's, so they didn't protest. And the Gemara proves this because if Rav Huna held that you could make a chazaka after he becomes an adult, how could you have a foreign person come down to the state of the minor? Maybe it's going to still be in his possession when the child becomes an adult, and he's going to claim, oh, you sold it to me once you became an adult, and I ate it. Look, I have this field already 7 years already. I already had it more than the years of chazaka. Obviously, Rav Huna hold that no, and that therefore he says that just give it to some fremde person. But the Gemara qualifies this and says, we didn't say that you cannot have a relative come down to the state of a minor when it's a relative. Says the Gemara, there's certain limitations. That's only a problem ila ba'achi the abba. That's only by his paternal brother, which they share the same father, where he could claim that he inherited it. But if let's say his maternal brother, less than, but we're not bothered because there's no such concern over there because there's no Yerusha through the mother. And even moreover, we didn't say that's a problem when you're a paternal brother, el ba'arasa. Only when it comes to fields, when it comes to homes, less than, but we're not concerned because the neighbors, they could testify, they know it came to the portion of the child. And therefore, that's also not a problem. Even by land, we didn't say it's a problem. Only if the courts didn't make a shtar chalukah, meaning when they originally divided, they didn't make a documentation of who gets what. But if they made the word got out, we all know that it's the child's. So therefore, in those cases, it wouldn't be a concern. But the Gemara rejects this. As if it's not true. It doesn't make a difference if it's a paternal brother. It doesn't make a difference if it's a maternal brother. We're concerned. Why concerned? I thought maternal brother, there's no such Yerusha. So Rashi explains. Maybe the guy's gonna say it was my mother's nichse milug. The father of this child was my mother's husband, who he was muchzik in it because he used to eat peiros. He died before my mother, and he didn't inherit her, and I yarshin half of it because of my mother. We're concerned he might make up that story. So it is a concern, even my maternal brother. And Lashna Agasa, Lashna Bati doesn't make a difference if it's properties or if it's home. Lashna Abed Itid, Lashna Loy, but it doesn't make a difference if we don't have a relative going there. Because the guy could come up with stories, and we are concerned because as Taisa says, Divmas Lashna, he says, I Chesk the bottom says Itid, the word gets out. He says, yeah, but you say we're more machmer, we're more concerned, and therefore we take precautions not to let a relative take over the property. Now the Gemara brings a very interesting story of Hahi Safsa. There was an elderly woman, David Lotlas Bansa. She had 3 daughters. Okay, her 2 daughters lived in in different places in Ashkelon and in Netanya, and she with her daughter, they were at the border. Her and her daughter were taken captive. Okay. Idach Tarti Bunsen. Now, regarding the other 2 daughters, Shriba Chadim, and one of them had a heart attack. She couldn't take her mother, the grandmother, in captivity. She passed away. B'Shavki Yunuka, and she left over a young child. Okay. So interesting Gemara. Amabai says, Hey Chanavid, what should we do with the properties of this grandmother? She had this nice, plantation there on the border of Gaza. We don't know if she's alive or if she's dead. Mamish, you could hear such a story going on right now. So he says like this. If you'll say that we should position this property in the possession of the sister, meaning, as Rashi explains, Allah is like Reb Shimon Gamliel, which we said Meridin, because Shmuel holds like him and we pass like Shmuel Bedini. So we pass like Reb Shimon Gamliel that the relative should come over and take over the property of the Shaveh. There's a problem in trying to do that. Why? Because Dilma Shchiva Savsa, maybe the grandmother passed away. If the grandmother passed away, that means the child from remember, there were two remaining sisters. One sister passed away. She left over a young child, an 8-year-old. That means he gets a portion in it because of his mother. Or maybe half is his because maybe both captives died. And if both captives died, that means to say the mother and that daughter, both of those get split by the remaining two sisters, which again, one sister died, that means the child gets it. It means he would be getting 50%, and the other sister would get 50%. So what's the problem? So the Gemara explains, you can't have that aunt of his take over the property because it might be the Cotton's property. So you can't just have that sister take it over. Okay. Says the Gemara, so so you say, okay, fine. Let the child take over the property. That's also a concern because maybe the grandmother didn't pass away. We don't know. We don't get clear reporting from even Hamas. They're not giving clear reporting what happened. And maybe he doesn't have a portion in it. Oh, that's also a problem. Because Rav Huna said, if the grandmother is still alive, she's a captive. The child can't go and take over the property of a captive. So we're stuck. You can't give it to the sister, to the aunt, because if she is dead, then it's the Cottons, and you can't have a Karib take over the property of a Cotton. And if she's not dead, then you you can't have the child take it over, because if she's not dead, then you're putting a Cotton in the next Shav, which I'll do that either. So Amabayi says, if the
grandmother is still alive, then it still belongs to the grandmother.
If she's still alive, yeah, that's why. No, so we don't know what it is. So the problem is, if she's still alive, you can't have the Cotton take it over, because you can't put a Cotton in the next Shav. And we can't have the aunt do it either, because in case she's dead, then it's the child's, and you can't have a car of Lenechse Cotton. So like stuck. Because we don't know what to do, you're running into a problem either way. Either way,
grandmother is dead.
If she's dead, then you can't have it by the aunt. Then you can't, because that means the Cotton inherited his grandmother, because his mother's dead. There was two sisters. One sister died, and she left over a young child. So that it's the young child's now. So you can't have the aunt take it over because it's his nachas. Some of Abai says like this. So therefore, palgi yavinu lala'achs. Look, 50% memonavshach. You're going to give 50% to the aunt, to the sister, because if both captives died, so she anyways inherits half of it. She gets her sisters and her mother's. She gets 50%. If not, if they're not dead, okay, that means they're alive. So you do bring down a relative in the nechse of the shaveh. So 50% for sure you give to the aunt. Now the idach palga, the other half, you're right. Mukmin la'apatrapa liyanuka. You appoint a caretaker for the child, meaning you're right. You don't put the child inside because maybe they didn't die, and you're not allowed to bring down a minor to the estate of the captive. So just you bring down an apotropos. Why would you get 2/3? That's half and half. The child it gets from his sister. Yeah, they're also. It's the same thing. They're gonna get that also.
Not dead yet. I don't know what she said.
Oh, you're saying for her property itself? Yeah, so that's the same thing. We don't know. It's either one. It's either one. Doesn't make a difference. That's what I'm saying. We don't know what happened with the grandmother. We don't know what happened with the sister. Either way.
So assuming that the grandmother died and the sister died, so she gets.
Either way, no, half. Half of both. It's half. Right. So this actually explains that this apotropos is not like really he's all he's giving is he just makes sure to safeguard it, like but we're not having really the Cotton's not really taking it over. So that takes. What? This has no other relatives. Yeah, I mean, the hard closest of he gets.
She has a son.
Right. Now, Rav Amma, he disagrees on this last point. He says, no, Migin Mekmin Betrabel Palga, once you're already appointing a caretaker for the 50%, Mekmin Betrabel Idach Palga. So then you just make a caretaker for the other 50%. Also, in other words, we're not going to make that 50% goes to the sister and 50% caretaker. Once you're doing caretaker, let's do a caretaker. We don't know what's going on anyway. Do the whole thing. Now, this was halfway through the story. Now, at the end, they heard that the grandmother passed away, but they didn't hear reports what happened with the daughter that was taken out. That they don't know what happened with the daughter, but they heard that the grandmother passed away. So Mabaya, now they come back to the Rav. So what should they do? He says, okay, look, a third, either way, is going for sure, because we heard the grandmother passed away. So a third goes to the sister. But and a third goes to the child, because most definitely a third belongs to him, because when the grandmother died, now there were three daughters. One daughter died, that's his mother, he gets a third. The other third, we don't know. Because we don't know what happened with if the other daughter is still alive in Gaza or not. So what you do is Yavin and Danka. You give a sixth, meaning half of that third, you give La'achta to the sister, as Rashi explains in Manavshach. If that sister died, so half of her portion belongs to the sister. If she's not, so that's the halacha meridin karbon nechsei. She's a relative just taking care of the captive. The other half of the third, which is a sixth, you don't give to her, because maybe she's dead and it belongs to her nephew, the cotton. And we know you can't bring down a karbon nechsei cotton. So what do? You appoint a caretaker for that child, because again, maybe she didn't die, and you can't have a relative take over that of a cotton. So no, meaning maybe she didn't die, and you can't give it to the child because you can't put a cotton in next day Shabbat. Ravam again, he says no. Migin the mokim abatrabel danka. Once you're already putting a abatrabel for half of that third, so mikmin abatrabel idach danka. You point a abatrabel for the other third. So a very interesting story regarding the how to finagle your way through the halachas of Rav Huna with the situation of the Maisa that happened with the grandmother and her three daughters. Now another story brings the Gemara related to this idea. Mari bar Isik, that was the name of this individual, Asli Acham Bechazai, meaning his father had gone to this place Bechazai. He married a woman over there, and he gave birth to this other brother. Now Mari came back to his original hometown, and he came to take over his father's estate. Now, at a later point in time, this other brother came to petition his portion of the Yerusha of his father. So Amalei, so this brother came and said publicly, I want you to split with me our father's estate. So Amalei said, Mar basically said to him, I don't know who you are. I don't recognize you. He's telling you very well, he doesn't recognize you. That's not called deceit. When he left you, you didn't have a beard. Now you're coming with a beard. Shlomo says the famous pasuk with Yosef, Echav, that Yosef recognized his brothers because when he left from them, they all had beards. Says the pasuk, they didn't recognize him because Malama comes to teach us when he was sold down as a slave, he didn't have a beard yet. And now he had this big beard. They didn't recognize him, so it makes sense. It's not deceitful to say that he doesn't recognize you. Bring proof. Go bring proof that you're a brother of his. Amalei says, Isli says, I have witnesses, but they're afraid of this Murray. It sounds like a good mafia name, Murray. But he's like the Gavra Limahu because he's a mobster, he's a bully, so they're afraid of him. So Amalei the day, so the Rav Chizah tells Murray, Zil ant Aisi Sahadi, you go bring witnesses, that he's not your brother. Meaning, either those witnesses that he has that came from there and they recognize who he is, bring them and you make them come and testify that he's not your father's son, or get other witnesses to prove that he's not your brother. So Amalei, so he said to him, he says, what, Dina Hachi, that's the halacha? What do you mean? He wants to collect. The onus of proof is on him. You're telling me that I have to go bring witnesses that he's not my brother? Amalei, he says, yeah, that's how I'm going to judge you and all your mobster friends. I'm going to go ahead and make you guys bring witnesses. Which the bottom Taisa asks, he says, what? Every wealthy, like Trump type of person has to bring witnesses that the guy who's making a claim is not his brother? In other words, what do you want from Murray? Says Taisa, no, here it's different because that he was saying he has witnesses and they're afraid to testify. So Rav Chisda said that, see, Mari had said, he says, so the Gemara actually continues. Amalei, look, Mari says to Rav Chisda, he says, wait a second, if they're afraid of me, what's the gain? Save at the end of the day, the witnesses are going to come and they're not going to testify. They're just going to say like I say, and not like he says. What's the point of me bringing them? It's not going to help. So Amalei Rav Chisda is not true. Tartu la'avdi. Two things they won't do, meaning because they're afraid of you, they're going to keep quiet. The bystander effect. But two things they won't do. In other words, not enough that you want them to be quiet and not say the truth, but that you want them to come and lie for you, that they won't do. Then the bystanders will actually usually stand up. Now, ultimately witnesses did come and testify that he's his brother. So the story continues. So Amalei, so that brother said to Rav Chisda, okay, now that it's established I'm a brother, I want him to share with me, to split with me from the vineyard, bustani, and the orchards of where the trees are, the shasal that he himself planted. Meaning Murray thought it's all his, so he invested in it. I want him to give me half as the increased value that he invested. So Malay, Rav Chisda said, Shapa Kamalach. Murray, your brother's saying very well. That now we learned in the Mishnah Bava Basra. Mishnah says, if someone passed away and he left older sons and minor sons. The older sons, they're 18-year-old Schwitzers, 23-year-old Schwitzers. These guys, they took the property of the father and they invested. The increase of the value goes to the pot, goes to the middle. The other brothers also get, even though it was the older brothers who did the work. And there's a Getin Tam Rabbi also says, which Rashi says, that can't be the Girsa. The Gemara doesn't bring Amiram to support a Mishnah. Moreover, Rabbah, who is a student of Rav Chisda, how could Rav Chisda be quoting Rabbah? He says, if you have the Girsa, it has to be V'chein Amar Rav, who is the Rebbe of Rav Chisda. But again, if it's a Mishnah, what do you need Rav for? No, there is an opinion of Bava Metzia Daf coming from Beis that says that we didn't learn this halacha only if the increase was because of the properties themselves. They just appreciated. But if the brothers themselves went and invested, then it goes to themselves. That's Rav Chisda says. No, he brings Rav's teaching over here to say that the halacha is not like that teaching. Even if the brothers invested with their effort, even so, like over here where he went and planted the paradise, the increase is going to go to the middle. So he's telling Mori, he says, yeah, your brother has rights even what you invested. Abai says, no, midam is it comparable? Hasim over there, the mission that you're bringing, Gidam Gabikatan Miyadi. The older brothers know they have younger brothers. They know that they're going to take what they invest. So they're Michael, they're part in it. So therefore, that's why they get it. Hacham Miyada. Here, do you think Murray knew that he had brothers, that it should be Michael? Maybe the brother does not get what he invested. Now, Galgal Milsa, so as Tosis explains that this Pesach of Rav Chisda ended up getting out, and it reached all the way, Mata, and it got to Lekamed Rabami. Rabami heard about this Pesach of Rav Chisda. He says, Gedoylem. He says, even more than this, regarding the halacha that we spoke about in the Daf, of a karev, a relative that comes down to the estate of a captive, which if the owner comes back, the halacha is that the owner takes what is his. We said over there, but Amru they said, but Shamalim Ka'aris. But even if the owner is going to take it, we still said that at least we evaluated for the relative that worked in it like a sharecropper. So said Rabami Hashda now, the day where Murray was working on his own land, it's his own father's, you think we're not going to give him that he made it and he did it for himself, we're not going to give him at least like a sharecropper in the other brother's portion? We can't just give it to that other brother 50%. It's no less than the case of the halacha that we're discussing on today's daf, which are Druha Lekamed Rav Chisda. So they brought this back. Remember, Rav Chisda was the one who was saying that, yeah, Murray, you got to split it 50%. And Ravami was saying, you can't give all of it. It's at least like a sharecropper Murray should get. He said, so Rav Chisda responded, this is not true. Midame, is it comparable? Hasim over there, Bishus. This that the relative comes was with the permission of the court that Nachas, that he comes down to the property of his relative that was in captivity. So therefore we give him at least like a sharecropper. Here when Murray came down to the property, he didn't ask anyone from the Bezin, from the Rabbanim, a permission to do that. But moreover, if he would come to consult, we wouldn't just let him take over the property, because his brother Cotton, who was a minor, and we can't have a relative, which was Murray was, to the property of his other brother, who's a minor. So Adrula coming to Rabami, these guys, they go back and forth between the Rabbanim. They came back and told Rabami what Rav Chisda said. Amalei said, oh, lo yisamu kamei the cotton who. No one told me that Mari's brother was a minor. Of course, if Mari's brother was a cotton, then I wouldn't say this halacha. I would agree to Rav Chisda that all of it would go to the brother, not that, let's say, Mari would get like a sharecropper. Think it to any time, host us.